Welcome on into 19 on the Clock, your Tri-State High School and College Sports podcast. I am your host, Brad Pushkar. Joining me is my co-host, Jackson McCarty. Jackson, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. About yourself?
I'm doing great because you know why? We've got some fantastic games coming up this week. It's rivalry week in college, and while we don't have all rivalries, we have some bowl eligibility games. We have some conference championship implications on the line. We'll go over all of those, and obviously we're going to talk about the game.
Absolutely.
We're in Ohio. Doesn't matter where you're talking about the game. But more importantly, we've got semifinals, finals coming up for high schools.
We're at our penultimate week of high school football. And that just made me really sad to say.
Hey, hold the tears for next week.
Yes,
it's okay.
Yeah.
We can let it all out then.
I'll wax poetically about some of the players that we've spent a lot of time on throughout this year. But, across Kentucky, Ohio, all of our Indiana teams are officially out now. Batesville is the last man standing over there. But that does not mean that we're done by any means.
No, not at all. And this is a game, we're going to start off with a game that you mentioned last week.
Yes.
Because you're like, this is going to be the game of the week. And we're talking about Kentucky. We're talking about a semifinals game. We're talking about Highlands versus Cooper.
This is to Kentucky what Moeller St. X was to Ohio. Very similar, high, very, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. Very successful seasons. There we go. We have a really close game that happened earlier this year that we'll get to look on as well. We'll start with Cooper just because I haven't been to a Highlands game yet this year. I have been to Cooper. Cam O'Hara, freak of nature, one of the best quarterbacks in the Tri-State. Austin Alexander, we know his drill. I went to that game, or the game for Cooper that I went to. He scored 2 touchdowns in, I believe, 2.5 minutes.
Solid.
Yeah. Matter of fact, the first one, if you guys were watching that final quarter, I didn't get it on camera because kickoff happens. It was about to like the 50, and I'm like, okay, probably just going to be a quick run drive or a quick run on this first play. I've got time to get down, set up. Cam O'Hara bombs it down the sideline, left side. Bear in mind, I'm on the left side.
Yeah.
And Austin Alexander catches that ball about 4 yards shy of where I'm at. So I would have had the perfect camera angle. And in my mind, I'm like, it's first play. They'll just run this. This is fine. And then I just had to watch Austin Alexander sprint by me and just be upset.
Establish the run game. Nope, they didn't.
Nope,
they didn't.
Well, what they did was establish dominance in that game. I'm a firm believer that the Jags are, if they're not at least on your very, very short list for state title teams, and I know at this point we've only got 4 per division, but they are the 1A of at least Northern Kentucky football to me, but that's I don't want to discredit Highlands at all. And before we talk about those Bluebirds, let's talk about what happened earlier this year. Highlands, Cooper played 24-21 Cooper.
Close.
You're right. And Cooper doesn't play very many close games.
No.
It was a tough one, and Highlands coming into this game with 2 losses. The other loss was also a 1-score defeat to Ryle. So, their margin of error and their window of success has been very, very tight. And even when those teams are getting the better of them, it's never by much, and it's always going to be close if they don't come out on top.
And we've been seeing Cooper play pretty dominantly in the playoffs so far.
Yeah.
Good spread and differential between what they're scoring and what their opponents are scoring.
It's freaky to even look at. Let's see, in the playoffs, 157-63 playoff differential. So you're almost, or I know you're shy of triple, but starts to look about like you're tripling up teams there. And then on the other side of stuff, Highlands 142-56. So they're still putting up very similar stuff, a little lower on the offense and a little lower on the defense. So this with how close that one was earlier this year, it's going to be magic.
Now, obviously, the name that you mentioned, like you mentioned Ponatoski, like you mentioned Herbstreit, is Cam O'Hara. He's been one of your guys, arguably all year. For him heading into this game, obviously I feel like he's going to be one of your guys.
Yeah.
Who are his key offensive weapons because obviously a quarterback can't do it all by himself.
Right, and obviously I've already mentioned Austin Alexander, so I don't want to beat that one too far into the ground. Isaiah Johnson had a touchdown while I was there as well. Okay. I believe he's a senior. I mentioned this whenever I went to this Cooper game on the final quarter, but they have a core group of juniors at Cooper that didn't lose a game between 3rd and 8th grade.
Oh.
Yeah, so while Isaiah Johnson is an outlier in that group, very much a difference maker, in kind of that senior leadership that offense can lean on and look to in tough moments.
Yes.
You've also got Keegan Maher, their running back, over 1,400 yards this year. And then, Austin Alexander as well, just freak of nature. Those would be the three key guys to watch, as Cam O'Hara tries to do his thing.
So what is Highlands going to need to do to stop them? Who's going to be the guys that they're looking into kind of depending on this week?
It's a tough ask to be like force turnovers against Cam O'Hara. Mm-hmm. But if you can do that with how close that game was, I think if you have one more interception in that game earlier this year, Highlands has one loss, Cooper has one loss coming into this. So you force a little bit more of that. That's what you're looking at. And, they've been so good throughout the playoffs. They've had 40 or more points every playoff game so far. Highlands has. So that offense is not going to be a problem. You've got Rio Littmer leading the charge. Gabe Williams, circling back to that create a turnover, he's got 5 picks on the year. So that would be the guy that you need to line him up with Isaiah Johnson. Or Austin. I don't know how big Gabe is. Like I don't have his measurements on hand. But if he's big enough to try to put up with Austin Alexander, you can do that. But he's one of those classic cases of way too fast for a linebacker, way too big for a corner. Just a nightmare matchup. You probably got to put half the defense on him just to try to stop him. To be honest. But yeah, I would lean
after him.
Yeah, exactly. I would lean into Gabe Williams on Isaiah Johnson. Try to cause some of those issues there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So obviously, I think it kind of feels like this is going to be the closest game we're going to see this week. It feels like one of those games you want to keep an eye on. One of those exciting games that aren't a finals.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
And it very much has that finals feel to it. Going back again to that reference I made to it being similar to the Moeller St. X game. The pressure. I would argue that this is more pressurized because while you might not win the state title, you live like 10 minutes from the Highlands campus. Yeah. If they put you out right now and get to the state title game, you have to hear about that all year long. Whereas you have bragging rights over this area until this time next year if you can get this done. So on a day-to-day basis, I think this is very much the Northern Kentucky state title game.
All right. Well, hey, that's why not make it the Northern Kentucky State?
Right.
Let's just give it that.
Let's put that branding on it.
I love that. So, but obviously they're not the only teams in Kentucky that are playing in our area. Do you want to run through who else is facing off for us?
Absolutely. So we've got 3 of them here just to keep eyes on. Ryle is still going. They've got Great Crossing this week. Beechwood drawing Lexington Christian, and then Covcath has Franklin County. That'll be a really good game as well. So you'll be able to catch all the highlights from those games on Final Quarter. We've got you covered. No need to worry about it. And then that's just Kentucky. We've still got 3 Ohio schools rolling.
Yeah, and that's one that you were talking about, Moeller.
Yep.
They're going to be playing Centerville this week.
Yeah, so, obviously limited knowledge on Centerville, but I'll tell you what we do know at this point. 10-3, as far as local opponents go, they beat Lakota East by 10 earlier in the year. Okay. They lost to St. X by 24. Okay. So, not to do I call it fight math because I always use it like in terms of MMA. Yeah. But you can't do this guy beat this guy, so this guy is better, whatever. But if you are going to try to do something like that, looks good for Moeller in that regard.
Keep the transitive property to algebra.
Exactly.
Don't bring it into sports.
Exactly. and betting lines, I figure. Yes. But what they do have going for them, they're going to be able to create a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. The stats that I've found, they have 3 guys above 6 sacks. Braden Seeley leading the charge with 9.5. Okay. So with a quarterback like Ponatoski, that pressure can create some chaos. It is very, I guess, unfortunate for the Elks that Ponatoski is such a calm playing. You know what I mean? He's not really much to scramble or get too worried. He'll take his sack, but he'll get right back up and dot you up. Okay. And so while they have those guys that maybe could slow some things down early, I'm not too terribly worried about it long term for Moeller. Okay.
Yeah. This. Obviously, we've been saying this for weeks. Moeller's kind of the team to beat at this point.
Of course.
Is there anything? I just blanked for a second. Last week, Moeller played Who?
St. X.
St. X. Okay,
Yes.
that was
Yes.
Time has just been a
It's a flat
wheel
circle.
for me.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that wasn't 2 weeks ago.
No, yeah, you're
Thank you.
It was also like 10 weeks ago at this point. So
Also, was there anything from that game against St. X that either gives you more confidence with Moeller going forward, or was a cause for concern?
No, I'm not really concerned about it. It's okay. So I grew up a Washington Commanders fan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, believe me, I appreciate the thoughts and prayers there. But watching this past Sunday, their game against the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
Dallas, not a great team this year.
No.
Don't feel like I'm going out on a limb saying that. Washington, on the upswing, had some bad weeks recently, still considered a better team than Dallas. You get in that game, what happens? Chaos.
Yes.
You know, rivalry, it matters to the players, to the fans, to everybody in that building. It's the exact same thing with Moeller and St. X. It was a tough game. It was a gritty one. They persevered. That's all that mattered to me. Because you're never going to have a perfect game against St. X. You're never going to have a particularly nice-looking game against St. X. All you can ask for is the win, and especially already being up 1-0 in the series, that pressure's kind of shifted onto you. They handled it in stride, did what they were supposed to do, and continued to win. So, no, to be perfectly honest, that game just kind of reconfirmed, even though this whole season has been confirming to me, that Moeller is about as legit as you're going to find in the state.
Okay. Hey, I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Centerville. Obviously they're a little bit out of our area here, so we don't always get to cover them. You mentioned that they beat Lakota East, correct? And remind me again, because I just mix all these things up in my head.
No, you're good.
Was it East that St. X beat, or was it West that St. X beat before Memorial?
West.
Okay.
Yes.
Then forget that I even mentioned that.
I might be wrong, but I think Moeller put out East. Now I'm
No, I
starting
think
to get a little lost, but yeah.
you might be right, and that sounds more correct than what I am. But yeah, looking at the Centerville team, who has been their big guy? Obviously, we mention Pontotoski all the time for Moeller. Who is the one for Centerville that Moeller's going to need to look out for, or anything like that?
Yeah, their driving force is their run game.
Yeah.
Walker Johnson's been the key guy in that. He's a little over 1,200 yards and over 20 touchdowns. Okay. So, very respectable numbers. That's going to lead just about every conference out here. But again, when you're facing guys like Christian Harris in Moeller and some of those just really tough, like Roman Mason, I know he's a defensive back, but he can still get in there and put up some tackles. Like, your team just functions so well across the board that while those numbers are great, and he might have 100 yards or 120 or whatever it is, it's not going to be enough to keep up with Pontotoski in my mind.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that would if you're watching anything that could be Moeller's undoing in this game, it's going to be the ground game and pass pressure. Just to get a quick recap on that.
Hey, that's I always like bringing up like it may not be a weakness per se, but it's a vulnerability, and
of course
you gotta take those with the strengths. So
right.
Well, let's move on now to another Ohio game. We've got Anderson playing Big Walnut.
Yes.
Your favorite school name.
The best name. And no offense to all of our tri-state folks, but the best name we have on this podcast to this point. Big Walnut is incredible. I mean, come on.
I'm always constantly amazed by the different names of high schools across the state.
Dude, it's beautiful. Well, in Arkansas, like, we have tiny little towns called, like, Bald Knob is one.
Yeah.
And then there's also just Knob, which is weird. But Possum Grape. Like, there's some really bizarre location names. High school names very much translate to that as well. But Big Walnut certainly on my top 5 in terms of, like, just funny locations that have stuck in my head now. But yeah, they're going up against Anderson. So might be more of a small walnut situation if we're being honest. Anderson is, I mean, they're a wrecking ball. You hear us talking about them constantly. Justice Burnham, for the great season he's had, wasn't really much of a great passing game last week, but he made up for it in spades on the ground. Okay. Matter of fact, I've got some numbers for you that I'll run you through. He had 262 and 1 interception through the air, and then 107 and 3 touchdowns on the ground against a really good LaSalle defense.
Yeah.
So, over 300 all told 3 touchdowns. And again, just one of the best defenses in the tri-state. You take that. Even on a bad week, he's still going to be able to go out there and make some plays.
Yeah, Anderson and Moeller both have been teams that just feel like, how do they keep doing this every week?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They feel destined to win.
Yes, like everything has aligned for them so far this year. And nobody's really getting in their way.
And I think a lot of people knew as soon as Anderson beat Winton, I believe it was by 14, still put up 30 on that defense, if I'm remembering right. I think that was kind of the big signal to everybody that was like, hey, I know Anderson is undefeated. I know you're already watching, but you cannot take your eyes off this Raptors team because every single week they're going to churn out a state title winning performance. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but I will be fortunate enough to be at this game for Final Quarter. It's really, really exciting to me because you don't know how many more chances you're going to get to see some of these teams, especially considering seniors and graduates and all that good stuff. So one more Raptors game's going to be good for the soul, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you obviously mentioned Justice Burnham. Mm-hmm. Any other guys you want to mention from that squad?
Of course. Darrell Turner, the running back, he obviously trailed Burnham in rush yards last week, but he's had a really good playoff to this point, just a really strong season as a whole. You've got receiver Trace Jalek you want to keep eyes on, and then Jayon Saunders, we mentioned him last week. He's now gone back-to-back interceptions, which is just great to see down the stretch, continuing to make that impact, 5 all told on the year. So.
All right, well, we'll see if the Raptors can crack Big Walnut or not.
I'd feel good about it if I'm a Raptors fan. I definitely feel good about
it. Bring the cracker.
Oh yeah,
things.
The little hand thing. Yeah, there you go.
I've only ever seen those at my grandma's house. Who loves antique things. So.
I think you genuinely if the Anderson student section gets a hold of that, I think that might actually be in play in the crowd.
They can take credit for it too. I'll even let them.
Reps, do your thing. You don't have to put the little bug up here that says 19 on the clock. You can just roll with it.
Because thank you, Brad Pushkar. You
yeah,
rock.
Exactly. There we go. Here's what I'll make that sign.
There we go. It'll be I'll expect it to be one of the rejoins in the final quarter.
Yes.
Just somebody cracking.
What we'll do is we'll just open every block with that sign. It'll just thank you, Brad Pushkar.
For supporting final quarter.
Oh, that's too good, man.
Now to a less funny name.
Yes.
Let's move on over to Taft playing Indian Valley. Taft, the Senators have been putting up some good games so far. Tell me a little bit about what you see for them heading into this matchup.
So before we dive into all that, I do want to give you a quick story. I presume this is okay to say. If not, I'll let you know. We'll chop it. But somebody we work with was telling me a story, interviewed Taft's coach, and said that Monsana Torbert comes up with such good game plans in his own off time that some of those factors get incorporated in. Yeah. He is such a talented mind for football.
Yeah.
That and we were having this conversation. I mean, that's future coach material. Not to discredit his ability to go to college or, continue to play ball, but whenever he decides his football journey is done, if you're already doing that at 17, 18 years old, you're on the right track.
Well, and especially as a quarterback, I feel like your high school coach is going to want you to do this. Your college coach is going to love that you can help find the different openings that they see in film and things like that. So.
Yeah, he's just very on top of the ball. And playing quarterbacks, one of the most underrated factors of a quarterback, it's why we saw Tom Brady succeed for so long, is that headspace, that mentality, that ability to process and register what you're seeing. Monsana Torbert has that in spades, and I think his play has certainly been showing it, if that game plan story didn't tell you enough. He is just on top of the world. He leads the team in pass and rush yards. So it's not just a situation of being a calm and composed pocket passer. And he's been the engine behind this Taft team that has turned a lot of heads throughout the year.
When you mentioned running yards, are those designed runs? Are those more just him finding the time to scramble?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
They include some read op kind of ordeals,
Sure.
but he's also just got that natural sense of the pocket whenever he needs to go. If his guys aren't going to get open, it's you can design them for him. He doesn't need them though. You know what I mean? He makes it function one way or the other.
Hey, that is what I like to see from players, especially as they're going to be heading into college, where you see more RPOs, more funky plays.
Right.
Honestly,
yeah, you've got to be prepared for pure chaos on every single play, because like that's what you're game planning for anymore, especially at the college level. With those 5 wide sets and trying to spread out the defense. And Montana Torbert absolutely capitalizes on a style of play like that.
has he had any favorite targets from his wide receiver core, things like that?
Yeah, Eddie Holloway, I would say, is probably the top guy at this point. He's got about 750 yards, give or take. And then on the opposite side of them, their defense has been just freaky. I know we were talking about Centerville's ability to pressure. That doesn't hold anything on Taft. They've got Bryce Brewster, who's over 20 sacks. They've got Chase Mack, who's got 12 sacks, and then Joe Bruce with 10 and a half. Yeah. So you're
behind the line. You're behind that offensive line far too much for any coach to love.
Yeah, you've got, 42 and a half just in 3 players.
Yeah.
That's a lot of quarterbacks that have spent a lot of time in the dirt, and that's all Senators. So, while the offense, obviously, I've been tooting that horn for a minute, but that front is just crazy, and you could not pay me to put on pads and go stand in for
stand against them.
No, dude. The Senators already took out my left side earlier this year. I don't need them. I don't need them taking out the rest of me. I'll happily stay on the sidelines.
Hey, and we'll keep you on the sidelines. Don't worry, buddy. So let's talk a little bit about Indian Valley as well. This was fun for me. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. Tell the side story. You text me. Here's the games we're going to be covering. Here's some stats, players to look for, kind of what we talk about. But you specifically walked over to me on Tuesday and said, "Hey, did you read them yet?" And I went, "No, I haven't had time." He's like, "Okay, just go to the very last one. Go to Indian Valley. I want you to look at this." And you pointed to running back Grady Kinsey, who Max Preps lists as having 2,800 yards, rushing yards, and 42 touchdowns.
Yeah. And
you just said, that is what it says. I don't want you to be surprised when we talk about it.
Well, it felt like I was setting you up for us to spend about 3 minutes of me being like, it's a running back. And you go, no, it's not. Those are passing numbers. And I go, no, it's a running back. And we do that for 3 minutes. So I wanted to make sure to avoid that.
No, it's not even a running back. It's just a freak of nature.
Yes, it is a way of life. Is what
it's the ball in Indiana Jones rolling down the track and ending up at the end.
Absolutely. And he is obviously we haven't got to lay eyes on him, but if those numbers are true, good gracious, what do you do with that?
Really?
Now, to revisit, because I was talking about Bryce Brewster and Chase Mack and all those guys, 19 tackles for loss, 19 tackles for loss, 11 tackles for loss. So they're not just sack guys. They're doing it all. They're getting in the backfield. Very promising, but totals like that will definitely make you go, that's a little tough. Yeah,
you've got to stop a running attack like that.
Yeah.
At any level.
100%. Well, and their offense as a whole, Indian Valley's, is 640 to 246 differential this year.
Yeah, nearly 400 points.
Yeah. And then their quarterback, Riker Williams, he's not quite at 1,000 pass yards, but he's over 1,200 rush yards, and he's credited with 14 touchdowns. Yeah. So, he's even, part of that party. They're not just making it, it's obviously the Grady Kinsey show, but, there are other guys to worry about there, which is even scarier.
Does this feel like the toughest matchup for Taft so far this year?
Yeah, I think just on a pure what you've got to worry about, and I don't know that there's very many dudes that you have to game plan for like this in the state. You know what I mean? Just to put him on that island, it sounds like he is in that Josh Ringer, that Cole Coops, that freak of nature running back list. That if you can't keep him under 100, or if you keep him under 150, it's a good day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, I think you'd be silly not to at least, it's an undefeated team that's tripling up on points. Like, that has to be the best team you play all year.
Yeah.
Because there's almost nobody else can do that, period. So, yeah, it's certainly something to worry about, I guess, if you're a Senators fan or a parent or what have you. But they've got guys that can kind of contain that at least, which gives me some hope.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely want to see how that one plays out. We're seeing it on the final quarter this Friday.
Yep.
And then we get to next week, and we're almost done.
I know.
It's
devastating.
Obviously, we have some plans for things as teams advance, so you'll want to tune in for that next week.
Yes.
But we talk about one more week till the end of high school football, and this Saturday, end a college football regular season, and then you break into bowl games, and you still get a full slate of college football.
But you're on the back 40.
Yeah, and you don't get to watch every single team every single week like I love. You know? If I can't set up a quad box, what's the point?
Don't worry, you'll be able to do it with like the GoDaddy Bowl and whatnot. You'll still at least have a couple of them.
And the
Jimmy Fallon Bowl?
Yeah, I was going to say, is that the Bad Boy Mowers Jimmy Fallon Bowl or whatever now? Or
and the Pop-Tart Bowl's in there too.
Hey, love the Pop-Tart Bowl.
They've got 3 Pop-Tarts now this year, don't they?
Yes, they do. Winner gets to decide which Pop-Tart gets eaten.
That's horrifying.
It's two brought back flavors, don't ask me what they are, and then a third one that's going to be more retro. Which my favorite joke that people were making was, it's the 2002 Spider-Man tie-in Pop-Tarts.
I'm going to take a wild guess that the other 2 are just strawberry and brown sugar cinnamon.
No,
Really?
they're it's like a hot fudge sundae one,
okay.
or some other, like a wild berry, one of those type things. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, more creative ones
Okay.
that they have. But we're not at bowls yet. We're at arguably the most important game in the Midwest each year.
Yes.
That is Ohio State and Michigan. The game playing on Saturday, noon, at the Horseshoe, and you can watch it right here on Fox 19 if you don't want to travel all the way up to Columbus.
I know you are obviously a Big Ten fan that's not associated with either one of these teams.
I'll say this. I grew up an Ohio State fan.
Okay.
I have my family was always from Cincinnati. My dad grew up watching the heyday of Ohio State in like the 60s and 70s with his dad, so I watched it with my dad as I was growing up. Then I went to Purdue, and my allegiance is to the Boilermakers first.
Right.
I still appreciate Ohio State.
Right. They're kind of that backup, like, okay, if they win the Natty, I'm not upset by any stretch of the imagination. I will ask you this, though.
Okay. Hit me.
In the shoes of an Ohio State fan, would you rather beat Michigan in this game? And this is a guaranteed situation, like only one of these can happen. Either you can only beat Michigan or you can only beat Oregon in the title game.
Oh, that's really hard, actually, because I know there are tons of fans out there who are like, if you don't beat Michigan this year, you're out.
Right.
And I think obviously part of that is because they are 6-5 this year. They just got bowl eligibility off a win off of Northwestern.
Of course.
I think at the core, you'd probably prefer the national title.
Just the conference title is what I'm.
You're saying a conference title?
Yes.
Beat Michigan. Beat Michigan over the Big Ten championship. Yeah.
Just the second matchup with Oregon, go down 2-0 in that series.
Yes.
Just Michigan.
Doesn't matter. No.
I was about to say, because I was talking to one of our Jacob Murray, one of our coworkers, and he was kind of in that, just beat Michigan. That's all that it is for me right now.
Because I think at the heart of it, the Big Ten championship doesn't necessarily have the luster that it used to. Now, obviously, I think this year it's a little different than because in years past, also, Michigan, Ohio State was the Eastern Division final.
Right.
You know what I mean? For most years.
Yeah.
Maybe Penn State was in second place, whatever, but it was generally came down to who wins between Ohio State and Michigan, goes on to the Big Ten championship game.
And plays Iowa.
And then plays Iowa, maybe Wisconsin, 1 year Purdue, somebody from the West.
Right.
But it was generally a team that was like 9-3 8-4, not a very strong performer. So you almost had that expectation going into that they're going to win. It doesn't matter.
Right.
That was the only reason I gave so much hesitation. I was thinking it was the national. You were saying the national championship game.
Yes.
And I think a national championship matters more than beating Michigan, but
a conference title doesn't
as much as beating Michigan.
My hang up with that, and then we can actually talk about the game.
Sure.
But my hang up with that is always, well, if Oregon comes in their first year in the Big Ten and wins the conference, that's not like Ohio State, presuming they win this game. They are the flag bearers for the original Big Ten, and they are fighting against this West Coast new wave that is just come in. And Oregon, very much looks like a possible national title contender.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of my hang up. But yeah, when you get into rivalries like this, you kind of just want to take out that other team so bad.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I think. I think, but and it's also obviously you have to beat Michigan to get to the Big Ten championship at this point. So that's also a little bit of a thing that plays into it. So that's why I think at the core heart of it all, fans want this win, and then I think they do want a win over Oregon. But it's also at that point you're still, like, you look at the college football playoff rankings right now, and it's Oregon, Ohio State, 1 and 2. The only team that's beat Ohio State is Oregon. The only team that seems like they're going to beat Ohio State is Oregon.
Boise State got close.
To beating Oregon.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But I know what you're saying. Like long term, it's hard to project Boise State keeping up with the Ducks.
And that's why, and that's why Boise State is in that 4th playoff slot right now.
Right.
Because of how dominant they've been and how arguably kind of lackluster the Big 12 has been looking.
Yeah. And the ACC.
ACC's been up and down. I think right now it's Miami and SMU at least. So that you have a second ACC team rather than 4 Big Ten, 4 SEC teams.
Clemson's not still in the running for that. They've got 2 losses, but I can't remember if they're both conference.
Because Clemson's done with their conference play. They're playing South Carolina this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
they played Citadel last week, South Carolina this week. They've actually been done for 2 weeks now.
Right.
So.
They've had some time. But
yes.
Circling back to
Let's get back to the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ohio State, Michigan in Columbus. What are you watching for here? What is something you can see happening in this game that would start setting off the alarm bells?
So I am going to cite I want to cite Chase Bachman, who works in the Toledo area. I used to work with him at 13 ABC up there. He is a sports anchor at WTOL 11 now. He was at Michigan. He was in Michigan in Ann Arbor for the press conferences on, I believe it was Monday. Okay. And one thing that I noted that he posted was that the quarterback, Davis Warren for Michigan, that he kind of says that their plan that could work for them this year is depending on the passing game.
Okay.
And specifically cited the 2022 game.
Okay.
Which, we kind of talked about last week, how last year was a lot of running, a lot of Blake Corum. I do think it could be interesting to see them go for the passing option. I think Ohio State's defense is too good for to be passed all over, though.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's to try to target. Well, obviously you have to target some facet of that defense, and none of it's going to give away. But if you're going to pick one, I think it's the run game.
Their defense, using advanced statistics, the defense's success rate for Ohio State is 4th in the country.
Okay.
Specifically on a drop back is 3rd.
Yeah. See, so what would that make the run one, like 7?
15th.
Okay. There you go.
Just because I think the drop back skews it a little bit and the way you do it, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and a lot of those is like, oh, we could be top 5 in this, but we're not good at defending the run. Or it splits off kind of weird.
And Ohio State has been number 1 in estimated points added basically all year. And that's just, on each play, what's the likelihood of adding a point?
Right.
And right now their offense is at .138, so every 10 plays is a point, basically.
That's just absurd.
And that's 2nd in the country. Defense, negative .168, number 1 in the country. Like this is not the same. This is not the same Michigans we've been seeing under Harbaugh.
Yes.
I think this is also not the same Ohio States that we've been seeing under Day. This feels like the most kind of locked in Ohio State's been in the last few years.
Especially considering how open it is. I think that, like, without that presence of your Bamas, of your Georgias, of your Clemsons, to date back a little bit, they finally do kind of feel like they've embraced that, we are the one. Or our conference is the one to produce this, and why shouldn't it be us? I know. That was a bad choice.
No,
but either way, they're in that situation where they finally are kind of holding the crown before they get it.
Yes, it feels like everyone is kind of setting them up to be the team.
Yes,
or the one of the two teams, because. I can't even think of it off the top of my head. Who is the SEC leading team right now in the playoffs?
Texas.
Texas.
It'd be Texas or Georgia.
You're right. It's Texas, and that's because I guess I always forget that they're in the SEC now.
That's another one. You're going back to that conversation about the Oregon-Ohio State thing.
Yeah,
that's Texas is coming from a weak Big 12 to dealing, and maybe taking over the SEC. That's.
Yeah, I think Texas has also had enough changes going into this year that it's kind of expected to see this. But you have Alabama 9-3. This is the first time they've lost like 3 games in a while.
Probably since almost when I was born.
Or not 9-3, 8-3. But yeah, I was gonna say it's been a long time, and I think it was like this is the first time. This last week was their first time scoring single digits since the LSU 9-6 game.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then before then, it's even further.
Right.
So it's just been such a weird year at the top, where you have just a couple teams that are like, this is the upper echelon, and then you have everybody else fighting in, and that's why I think it's kind of fun that you have the 12-team playoff, because you can actually give those teams chances to make those upsets and prove, or disprove that belief of like it's these 4 teams and nothing.
Well, and I think this year it gives it that March Madness feel.
Yeah, because, a little bit.
Because there's like obviously in March Madness, like Purdue, for example, for those couple of years, like you did come in being like, this is the respective Georgia, to this situation, but it's still just so open. You're not really picking anybody as an actual favorite. And I think that's absolutely what we're going to get with this 12-man setup.
Yeah. And so I do want to mention with Ohio State with this game that believe Buckeyes did an interview with Jim Tressel. He said that he's going to be attending this game. Is one of the first one he's been to in years.
Yeah.
Obviously, national championship coach for them. That is actually, I mentioned growing up an Ohio State fan, the Fiesta Bowl win over Miami is one of the first college football games I can remember watching.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Kind of that core memory of, whoa, this is really cool.
Yeah, because the quarterback was Craig Krenzel at the time. Okay. He's just always been like a guy in my head that I'm like, yeah, Craig Krenzel, why not?
I have that with Colin Klein from K-State because I went to the Cotton Bowl between them and Arkansas whenever I was 8. Sorry, I just with my own.
That's what's so fun about college football is that you get guys that may not go on to the NFL and be great. Obviously for every Craig Krenzel, there's a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, but you also can look at those guys in college and go, oh man, it's crazy that this guy became Patrick. Because Mahomes didn't win a national championship with Texas Tech,
right? But
now he's winning Super Bowls with the Chiefs. Yeah. Vice versa, you have national championship winning teams, and obviously Ohio State's had a lot of quarterbacks that don't always go on to have success. But Justin Fields is with the Steelers right now, maybe doing something there. It's just fun to watch.
Yeah,
that's what you love.
Haskins got drafted in the first. You have Cardell and JT tried to at least get up there and do something. Will Howard will probably be a mid-round pick. That could latch on somewhere and do something. It's a good time, and they're you get to watch kind of the peak of it all at these massive programs.
Yeah, and so one more time, that's noon right here on Fox 19 and up in Columbus. So,
yes,
be sure to tune in if you so inclined. Another game at noon, another major rivalry in the region. Just on the other side of the river, it's the Governor's Cup. It is Louisville heading to Lexington to play Kentucky. Cardinals facing the Wildcats. Wildcats had won last year. I think this has all the chances to be a very chaotic game.
Yeah.
Kentucky finished 1-7 in the SEC, with the only win being over Ole Miss.
Yep. The one you would expect.
Of course, and then the very close loss to Georgia, and I think a blowout loss to Vanderbilt.
Right. It's
Auburn as well. Kentucky kind of confused me this year, and it was very hard to keep track of what was happening in a way.
Don't worry, you're not the only person that was confused about Kentucky, because what is that season as a whole? If you put this season in a time capsule, and then you dug it back up in 20 years, people would assume it's fiction.
I think, if I may,
yeah,
I think if you look at it in like the grand scheme of things, it would have been like, oh, did they get a new coach that year?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
A fair point. Because obviously Stoops being kind of the bearer of consistency out there for so long. It does. Yeah, you're right. It's very topsy-turvy for them.
Yeah, so I think that is kind of just interesting to. It's weird to see that they've fallen like this in a way.
Yeah.
Louisville not doing as hot either. They played Florida State for the ACC championship last year. That this game was actually the start of a 3-game skid, losing to Florida State, and then losing to USC in the Holiday Bowl, I believe it was. And that was not even close. It was like 42-17, something like that.
Something gross,
it was a lot of points. But that also, I think that was the eggnog dump as well, which is one of my favorite memories for USC. But Louisville finishing 7-4 overall, 5-3 in the ACC. I don't believe they're in any kind of contention for the championship, even if things go haywire this week, and likely won't be in a playoff call. But obviously, this is an interesting game because neither team needs it for bowl eligibility. Kentucky's already out, Louisville's already confirmed. But it gets that core of why rivalries are great, and it's we want to beat the other guy.
Well, and I guess if we don't have enough 6-6 teams, Kentucky could still
you
be
could
one
still
of those
sit on
fringe
that.
ones. So maybe, but you're right. You don't bank on that. And this is, like you said, just for the love of the game. Louisville, we talked a little bit about how weird it is that Kentucky, was expected to be kind of middle of the pack, ended up closer to that bottom echelon. Louisville,
second to last.
Right. Louisville was projected to be an ACC title contender, and then lost that steam slowly but surely. So it's a tale of two seasons that were not up to snuff that either team expected.
I also think that this year with the ACC, Miami was not expected to do as well as they did. Obviously, be good, but not be.
Yeah, they didn't
top.
expect Cam Ward to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
Didn't expect him to have his name thrown around for a Heisman, I think, going into it. And then also SMU.
Yes.
I think coming in was less expected as well.
If you'd have told me that they not only would have 10 wins, but they would do it without Preston Stone at quarterback, I'd have been like, what are you playing, college football, the video game? Like, what are we talking about here? But yeah, they've been shockingly impressive. And
congrats on your simulation, bro.
Yeah, literally. And then obviously Clemson's still hanging around in that part as well.
Yeah, but that's another game that's happening at noon. I never even brought up lines. I want to bring back the line for Ohio State real quick.
Yeah.
I'll mention just to mention it. Started off at 20.5 in favor of Ohio State. Total at 43.5. Advanced statistics from College Football Insiders projecting Ohio State at about 30 points, Michigan at about 13. Okay. So about 17-point difference, a little under that estimation, but about the same for total.
Yeah.
Which I think was interesting to see. For Louisville, Kentucky, 3.5 in favor of Louisville, 48.5 total, and it kind of sees this as a relatively high-scoring game. 28 points for Louisville, 24 for Kentucky.
Which is kind of a weird projection based on Kentucky's defense kind of being the whole reason that they were close in the Ole Miss game and close in the Georgia game.
And that's why I'm kind of curious to see if it's just like, this feels like it is can Kentucky just stop Louisville from Louisville's got a kind of top 20 offense still. Defense, I think, is where they lack a little bit. So could we see Kentucky offense stepping up a little bit against that defense and scoring those 24 points, but not being able to hold Louisville to under that 28? I think that's why I kind of like this estimation overall. But I do think it'll be interesting to see really how that all plays out in the long run. So
yeah.
Now we'll move to a game that is not a rivalry, but does have bowl eligibility.
Yes.
And that's TCU UC coming here to Nippert. It's going to be a 6 p.m. game from the last time I checked, and I think times have been moving around a little bit on me, but 6 p.m. game at Nippert.
Yes.
TCU was not a team that it was expected to do super well in the Big 12 to start the year off. They've won 4 of their last 5 games.
Yeah. Well, by mid-season, they were calling for Sonny Dykes to be gone.
Yep.
There was chaos about, and obviously just a year removed from, or are we 2 years removed now from the TCU? Yeah, because it was, so 2 years removed from a title run, or in that stratosphere. So weird turn of events, but they've started picking it back up. Yes,
and I wanted to point out one of their losses was to SMU because it brings back what you love about the Big 12, 66-42 loss.
Yep, there we go. That's music to my ears, man. That's that Cliff Kingsbury coaching at Texas Tech style of football. That
wing it, get it down there.
I can also hear like John Gruden quarterback camp like playing in the background.
Yeah,
it's like how you associate a smell with like a place. You know what I mean? You see high scores.
Fresh scent of grass.
Exactly.
Brings me back.
Takes me to springtime. But yeah, it just makes me happy to see.
Yeah, and last week was a win over Arizona, 49-28. Where TCU has been kind of seeing some success is that passing game. That drop back success rate, 47.1%. That's 7th in the country.
Yeah.
For a team that's not anywhere near that top 25 at this point. And so this could be tough for UC, but I do think is interesting and I think will play a factor is the weather.
Yes.
And, Coach Scott Satterfield, defensive tackle Dante Corleone, both talked about that in their presser this week. So let's take a listen to what they had to say about this game.
Haven't experienced what they'll experience Saturday night, and I think it certainly will be cold and could be windy, could be some snow blowing. I mean, it could be all these things. Dial it all up. I mean, I'm probably in favor of it all. Let's get it one of these great winter Ohio days.
It's going to be a big surprise for them not knowing what Cincinnati going to provide, how bipolar our weather is, but it's going to be a big advantage for us because we're used to it.
And so, Jackson, we talk about, you growing up in Arkansas, me growing up in Fort Wayne. I did work in Texas for 2 years in Wichita Falls, which is about 2 hours northwest of Dallas. Let me tell you, it snowed maybe 3 or 4 times total while I was there.
Give me a plane ticket.
But it still got cold. And that's, I think, the thing that, as much as, you think about the South and it's like, it never gets cold. These guys aren't practicing in it, but I don't think, it's not like they've never seen snow before.
Right, unless it's El Paso, most of Florida, or you get out to the west side of stuff.
Or RGV, the Valley.
Right, you're still going to get cold. It snows in Atlanta, and that's, pretty, I think that's about the same level of, no, it's not. Atlanta would definitely be more north.
I think it's a little bit more north, yeah.
Yeah, but still.
But Fort Worth, where TCU is, I do think that there will be a bit of a factor in this because they're right. They're not practicing it. They're not getting used to this. Especially this week, UC is going to be seeing cold temperatures, or has been seeing cold temperatures, and dealing with rain on Thursday, snow potentially.
I'm sorry, I think we just stepped into the 19 at noon.
Oh, whoa.
I think we've...
Oh, first alert weather. No, and Ethan, Ashley, Catherine, and Steve can all correct us, and Frank correct us when we get that wrong. But it'll be interesting to see how that weather does affect them because that makes it harder to catch that ball and everything like that. So,
and even if Texas does feel it, the state of Texas, obviously not the Longhorns, but even if the state of Texas does start to feel that cold, it's not like what we've dealing with up here.
It's not like we got up here.
It's not that wind. It's not that weird.
Different than what you
rain.
get up the other side, of the north side of the state too,
Yeah.
because they've already seen a lot of snow and things like that, and you get that lake effect.
I am so happy we don't live by the lakes.
Having lived in Toledo,
Yeah.
you should be.
Yes.
There were a couple times we had to take the Jeeps to get home because your car was just snowed in.
Now, counterpoint, I did live in Wyoming.
Fair enough.
So I'm not a stranger to snow,
Yeah.
but either way.
But yeah, so looking at the lines where they started out this week, 2.5 in favor of TCU, 58.5 total.
Mm-hmm.
Advanced Analytics, 30.5 for UC, 30 for TCU. So they're slightly favoring UC.
Right.
I don't know if that. I think that is actually just from the stats.
Okay.
I think the UC, it's just this thing where like that UC offense, you need to get going. You need to get that air game going, or you don't have a ton else to depend on. And we saw that in that Iowa State game.
I would also argue if your defense is letting you see prolonged drives, that could be your game ender. Because if you put your offense on the bench for 6-7 minutes of game time,
they're cooling off,
Yeah.
and they need to stay warm this week. Yeah.
you're a block of ice over there.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden you're out of rhythm. You're out of practice. You're on the road dealing with this cold. Like those factors start to compound really bad. So that would at least be the thing that I'm watching here is how long can UC average their time of possessions out?
Yes. I want to see UC having the ball as much as possible.
Yeah.
And keeping it for as long as they can. So yeah, that game again is 6 o'clock at Nippert. Win and they're bowl eligible.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of win, and to go on to something, we're going to talk about Miami Bowling Green State University. This is a Friday game. This is a game that can decide who goes to the MAC championship or not.
So what I'm hearing is you're infringing upon my high school football schedule.
Yeah.
Well, the MAC is. Not
Yeah,
you.
blame the MAC.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting. Well, this is it fairly early, isn't it? Or do we know?
You know what? We can double check that because I sat down and talked to Michael Burwell, who is the Bowling Green beat reporter for the Toledo Blade, kind of talk about what this team has been doing this year and what Miami should expect to see. All right, joining me now is Michael Burwell, the beat reporter for the BGSU Falcons for the Toledo Blade. Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Yep, thank you for having me.
All right, so let's kind of start off here. BGSU, Miami, playing on Friday, arguably for one of the remaining spots in the MAC championship game. There are some ways that the tiebreakers could play out that could actually end up with both of them. But when you look at how matchups are happening for the final game of the year, a lot of the teams that are expected to win would mess that up and things like that. So talk to me. You've been covering the Falcons for about 2 years now, and especially in the last 3, we've really seen them compete harder in the MAC. What has been the key to their success for this year?
Yeah, this year especially, there's just a very experienced group. They have 32 seniors on the team, tons of juniors who have played a lot of football, a lot of transfers who came in and just made immediate impacts. So just that veteran presence has really been key for them this year. They've gotten the momentum these last couple years with getting some big wins, performing decently, in the MAC, obviously compared to some really tough years before that. So just the experience factor has played such a key role. And there's definitely some talent all over the field. They've got some superstars on offense, very veteran quarterback who just does his job. Defensively, each position, there's just so much experience all over the defense as well. So it's really just kind of come together this year, just how much experience they have and how motivated they are. A lot of the seniors decided to come back this year. Didn't enter the transfer portal. Added another year of eligibility. They wanted to have a chance to for this moment to compete to get to a MAC championship, and so it's just kind of been a combination of just a lot of building up these last few years.
And you mentioned a lot of star talent. One person I do want to bring up is the tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. He has been, I mean, 1,300 yards isn't numbers you always see for a tight end, even in other conferences. I know you were at Scott Loeffler's press conference earlier, and he did announce that that Fannin is going to be a game time decision. If he is not in this game, how do the Falcons need to adjust in your eyes, or what is going to be the backup plan to that?
Yeah, if he doesn't play, that would be enormous. I mean, he has basically half their receiving yards. I mean, he's such a go-to target, and pretty much nobody has stopped him this year. If he isn't able to play, they're probably gonna have to really rely on the run game. They have a couple really good backs in Terrion Stewart. He's been really effective all season. Jason Patterson's been effective. They like to get a couple other guys involved in the run game, kind of on jet sweeps, kind of some misdirection stuff. So if Fannin doesn't play, and especially since it's going to be extremely cold on Friday, I think they're really going to try to get the run game going. And the last game against Ball State, they kind of struggled on running the ball, but for the most part, they've been really effective these last handful of games. The wide receiver position has been extremely thin this year. They've had some injuries, some other stuff. Malcolm Johnson Jr., transfer wideout from Auburn, he's had a pretty solid year. They'd probably look to him a lot. But honestly, they're very, very thin on the wide receiver position. So if Fannin does not play, that's going to make an enormous difference for sure.
Really limiting the options that need to be covered by Miami and kind of making defense a little easier for him, I would imagine.
Right, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about Scott Loeffler as well. The first 3 years, I believe, his first 3 years were all under 500 winning records. In the last three, he's really turned it around, is getting those 7-win seasons, bowl eligibility, and is now competing for this spot in the MAC championship. What do you think for him as a coach has really turned on these last couple of years?
Yeah, it's just getting the players, I think, to buy into the program. Even before he arrived, I mean, BG had a couple just really, really bad years. So he inherited a program that was just struggling mightily. So he basically had to rebuild it from the bottom up. And it's been, maybe to some people it's been a slow process. He kind of mentioned, when he first got hired, we're going to be really bad this year, then we're going to be even worse next year, and kind of build it up to competing for MAC championships. But it's just getting the right players for his system. The transfer portal has definitely been helpful these last couple years. But it's just a matter of players believing in what he can do. He's brought in some good assistant coaches. Their offense is really fun to watch, and their quarterback Connor Bazelak, has played a lot of college football, spent a few years at Missouri, a year at Indiana, came to BGSU last year. I mean, he is well in control of that offense. He's been playing at a really high level. So I think it's just a matter of getting the right players into the program, and that's been really beneficial, obviously, for Coach Loeffler.
And you mentioned the transfer portal. That's obviously something that gets talked about a lot. And it's interesting that Bazelak came from IU, who then took Curtis Rourke from OU, another MAC quarterback. And when you look at a team like the Falcons, do you see that as one of the positives of the transfer portal, of giving these guys a place to play and find the competition that they can match with, I guess?
Yeah, without question. I mean, obviously the transfer portal, you're going to lose some players as well. I mean, BG's definitely lost some really talented players the last couple of years. But for the most part, it's just the way, college athletics are now. So you kind of have to embrace it. And, bringing in someone like Bazelak, someone like the wide receiver Malcolm Johnson Jr. from Auburn, where he got pretty limited playing time, but has been really solid this year. That's just a benefit. For a program like BGSU, bringing in these players, especially experienced players as well. Bazelak had so many games under his belt in his first 4 college seasons. It really didn't take him too long to kind of figure out BGSU's system under Loeffler. And then this year, the whole season he's been just absolutely outstanding. Very few interceptions, makes the right decisions. He basically, he's put up some pretty good numbers, but he's not a guy who's going to throw for 330 yards every single game. But he's gonna find the right guy. He's gonna make the right reads, and his completion percentage is through the roof this season. I think around 68%. So he's just has that control of the offense, and just the transfer portal overall. I think BGSU is kind of embraced it and has realized we can get some absolute game changers in here if we bring in the right guys.
I'd say, yeah, it is a 68% this year, 69% against the conference. So obviously he's been pretty locked in when playing against other MAC schools. Looking at this matchup for BG, give me one thing that if it goes to plan, is kind of their key to a victory, and one thing that could cause problems if Miami were to take advantage of it.
Yeah, one thing that's working well for BG is just defensively, they're playing really, really well. They just held Ball State and Western Michigan, 2 really high scoring opponents in the MAC, to 13 points apiece. Defense is playing probably the best since Loeffler took over. During this 5-game winning streak they've had, they absolutely have to be lights out defensively to give the offense a chance. Because obviously, if Fannin doesn't play, points might be hard to come by for BGSU. And obviously, Miami's defense is pretty outstanding as well. So BGSU defensively, they have to be rock solid. They can't give up any big plays. And then, offensively, obviously it's going to be kind of to be determined what's going to happen with that. But their ability to control the clock and grind out long possessions it's been impressive this season. They had a 16-play, 90-yard opening drive against Ball State on Saturday, which took off 8 minutes in the opening quarter. So just maintaining possession, going to be big in that regard as well. And, obviously against their last loss against Northern Illinois, the offense, there was no offense. Northern Illinois completely dominated defensively. And this Miami's obviously going to be BG's toughest defensive test since that game. If Miami comes in and they put pressure on the quarterback and can get to Connor Bazelak, then BG might be in for a long night. They had a lot of troubles against Northern Illinois. They literally couldn't get into their offense because he was under pressure within a blink of an eye, basically. So BG, their offensive line is going to be huge, obviously trying to slow down Miami's pressure. If BG can't protect the quarterback, then it could be a really long day for the offense.
All right. Well, I think this definitely feels like a game that is going to be a bit of a defensive battle. I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out on Friday.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of my feeling, is it's going to be 2 defenses just absolutely going at it, and points are going to be hard to come by. There maybe there's a special teams play or a defensive turnover that results in points that could decide the game. But yeah, it's with the weather and just how cold it's going to be and everything. I think this is setting up for a defensive battle.
Well, speaking of the cold, keep warm while you're covering up there. I'm sure you'll be in the press box, but I hope it's an enjoyable game for you to get to watch.
Yeah, things I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's the biggest game for BG since 2015
Yeah.
when they reached the MAC championship game. So there's a lot on the line. It's going to be exciting to see who comes out on top.
Have you seen fan reaction? I mean, this is 9 years since the last time they played in and won the MAC championship. Are the fans, are the students kind of building up to, yeah, we can really make it to this championship?
Yeah, I think so. The student support has been really good throughout the season at home games. Their home crowds have been pretty solid as well. I think they're definitely behind it. They realize what's at stake. They've been through the long rebuild, the really tough years in the late 2010s, a winless season during the COVID year. There's been a lot of lows in BG in the last decade, and a win on Friday would just, it would be remarkable for them. So I think the fans are excited. I think the team itself is just extremely thrilled to be in this position, and yeah. So I think the BG community is definitely rallying behind them.
All right, awesome. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up here?
Oh, it should. I think it's going to be a good. I think it's going to be a good game. I would be stunned if one team blows the other team out or wins by a considerable margin. I think it's going to come down to late in the fourth quarter. Who makes that game-changing play, and in any area, offense, defense, or special teams. So it should be a good one to decide who gets to go to the MAC championship game.
All right. Well, hey, Michael, thank you so much for talking to me. We can find you on X, Facebook as well, or
just X.
Just X. Great.
Yep. And then online on our website, ToledoBlade.com.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Yep, thank you.
We'll send it back inside.
So yeah, thanks again to Michael for taking that call with me, talking about this team, and something you didn't. I'll pull back the mirror. Jackson did not get to listen to that before we put it into the episode. No. So to kind of let you know, the biggest thing is that this feels like it's going to be a defensive battle.
Okay.
Miami's defense has been playing pretty solid for the last, especially last like 4 or 5 weeks. Bowling Green has been seeing a strong defense as well, but their biggest piece is on offense, and that is their tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. Now, this is Wednesday. It is 1:45 in the afternoon. There's still not been any update on if he's going to be playing or not. Head coach Scott Loeffler said he's going to be a game time decision, but that is still, that's still 2 days away.
Right.
And so to mention, like, he's up for the John Mackey Award, which is, a tight end award. He's 1,300 yards. Mm-hmm. He basically is a wide receiver that is marked as tight end because he's a big guy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. They can call him one thing, but he's very clearly just a weapon.
Yeah, and if they do not have that weapon, their receiving core has not looked great, has not looked spectacular enough that Miami should really, fear it in a way.
Right. Well, especially leaning into that sound that you were telling me about. Like, if it's going to be a war of attrition on defense, you take that tight end out of the mix, and it becomes a lot easier for Miami to stomach.
Yes, because like I was mentioning, like I was telling you before we even started, they run their starters. They list their starters with 3 tight ends, which we've actually seen the Browns do in the NFL a little bit, but that's more for like a running game because It's just like, just put 3 tight ends on there, have them block, go for it. They're not doing that as much. They have some run game. But that passing game has been big. I mean, there's highlights of him throwing like 66-yard touchdowns or catching 66-yard touchdowns, stuff like that. And you just don't see that from tight ends all the time.
Unless it's Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
And he's still tearing it up.
Michael Mayer, too,
Yeah. But this should be an exciting one. Very, very important one for the MAC.
Yes. So if Miami wins, they are the number 1 seed. Mm-hmm. BGSU wins, they are the number 1 seed. Now, hold on, I need to double check that I look. Okay, so if Bowling Green loses, they would need Ohio to lose to go into second place and do a rematch.
Yeah.
If Miami loses, they need Ohio and Buffalo to lose.
Okay. So the moral of the story is just win.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is a game to decide your own destiny.
Yep.
To win, you want to win this. You want to lock this in. And for Miami, get to go to the championship game 2 years in a row. That's exciting. That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You take that every day of the week.
But I also point out for Bowling Green, this is their first MAC championship in 9 years.
Really?
They won in 2013 and 2015.
Okay.
Lost in 2003, 2014. So they had a 3-year streak of getting to the title game, and then just had some rough years. Scott Loeffler came in, had some a tough first 3 years. Really kind of worked in his guy. I don't always like saying that, like, oh, let him bring in his guys, but he did.
It worked.
He got his recruits, and they've been beating their rivals UT for the last couple of years. Now they're competing for this MAC championship, and that's what you like to see, and that's that kind of parity in a way that you like to see from conferences where it's like it's not just Ohio State and Michigan every single year. It's not just Alabama, Georgia going at it each year, or like maybe one team swaps out. It's like no, the MAC actually gets a nice little rotation in, and OU dominated for a little while, but that's fun to get that rotation in. So
it's officially open now.
Yes.
And we're very much benefiting from that, just as fans, because like you said, whoever loses this game, you're not done watching football.
Nope.
Your season's not over. You've got 2 more games to worry about to see if maybe you still have that conference title game. So this is going to be a good one.
And we did look it up. This game is at noon. It is in Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing I was going to mention? Lines. So these are Monday. This was established Monday, established before the announcement of Harold Fannin Jr. being possibly out, being questionable. 2.5, 43.5 total.
Okay, 2.5 in favor of Bowling Green.
Bowling Green, yes. I did check today. I don't always check, but I did check ESPN bet today. Down to 2.
Okay.
I think until something gets officially announced, it's going to stay at about that 2 to 3 range.
That's almost definitely just hedging because of the game time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so looking at the advanced stats from College Football Insiders, 25.5 points for BG projected, about 21.5 for Miami, about a 4-point game. I do think this feels like it's and I'll point out again that Michael said this as well. It feels like a game that's going to come down to a touchdown or maybe a field goal and be one of those heartbreakers for either team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely going to be a fun one to watch. And that wraps up our week for rivalry.
Do you not have enough? Was that not enough for you guys?
Do you need more football? Do you need more? Well, we'll still have more.
Download our Fox 19 Sports app.
Hey, there you go. And you can get Bengals, get FC, get Reds coverage as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, our sports team has been doing great stuff. You can follow Gabby, Reagan, Joe, and Jeremy on X, on Facebook. You can follow us on X as well. And be sure to follow here. If you want to watch on YouTube. You can watch it on the Fox 19 app, on your Roku, all that stuff. If you want to just listen, we're on wherever podcasts are delivered. And we figured out what mistake we made last week, and it will not be missing again this week.
Yes.
Or next week, all that fun stuff. So we got that locked in if you did miss us for a week. But that's all we have for this week, so thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.